Hey there, let's talk about February. In February, I read 9 books, which I thought was pretty good, considering it is the shortest month of the year. I read 2,944 pages, and we're just going to jump right into it. The first book that I read this month was The Dangerous Art of Blending In by Angelo Sermelis, I think that's how you say his name. Sorry, Angelo. This book was fantastic. I give it 5 stars. This book broke my heart. I feel like the entire time that I was reading it, it's clearly not February right now, and so it's been several months since I've read this book, and still picking it back up and looking at it and reading the synopsis again to prepare to talk about it, I felt like my heart was gonna break all over again. It was just one of those books. It's about this teenager whose name is Evan, and he grows up in a very strict, very traditional family. His mother is physically abusive and verbally and emotionally abusive towards him throughout this entire book. For one reason or another, for anything he does in particular, for nothing that he does, it's just they have a family dynamic of violence and abuse, and that's just what it is for Evan. But he is terrified about his mom and dad finding out that he is actually gay, because he knows just how much worse his entire home life would become if they were to find that out, because they do not approve of the fact that he likes boys. So I don't know. I mean, I read books like this sometimes and I think I still can't believe that this is a thing that's happening in 2018. But it is still a thing that's happening, and so it's important to talk about it. So if you're going to read this book, you should probably just know that there are some pretty graphic scenes regarding his mom abusing him. There's some pretty, really terrible, awful talk in regards to attitudes towards homosexuality. But, you know, this book was an Own Voices book that the author wrote about his experience with these things when he was a teenager, and his experience of how his family dynamic was very toxic towards the person that he was. And I think that books like this are important to read about, just so you can get an understanding that things like this are still happening in the world. But Evan will definitely break your heart. 5 stars. The next thing that I read was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. And I recognize that I'm probably the last person in the universe to read this book, because apparently it was a really big thing a couple years ago. I had no idea. I picked it up at like a Goodwill for $1 just on a whim, not really knowing anything about it until my friend told me, oh, this book was really popular and blah 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 and this, that, and the other thing. So I read it, right, because I picked it up for $1, and I kind of hated it. I kind of don't understand why this book was such a popular thing. I gave it like 2.5, maybe 3 stars, barely. I just don't think that this was written very well. I don't really know what to say about it. First of all, it's pretty darn short there, and you know, it's about these rich kids and their like vacation homes for the summer or whatever, and you got an unreliable narrator, and it's basically their adventures during the summer, and then there's like a plot twist, there's like a big reveal kind of thing or whatever about something that happened a couple years ago, you know, that explains why everybody's relationships have changed and why they are the way they are now. And I won't say what it is, just in case you, like me, have also not read it yet, even though I feel like everyone has. But I felt like it was super obvious what was gonna happen, the big reveal or whatever. I wasn't surprised by it. I felt like you could see it coming just based on the way that things were written about earlier in the book. And it's not even that I had so much of an issue with that as it is that I didn't feel like I could connect to a single one of the characters here. Like these very privileged, rich white kids, right, that just do whatever they want and run around their, you know, beach houses on their private island, and grandpa hands out money all the time, and, you know, their parents are constantly getting drunk and bickering and fighting about who's gonna get the biggest inheritance. Like, none of their problems felt like real people problems or felt like anything that I could relate to. And so anytime one of them was like struggling or upset about something, I just found myself rolling my eyes, because it's like, in what world is this really a problem? So yeah, I didn't really like it. Then I read Humans of New York by Brendan Stanton. I don't know if you're really gonna say, hey, did you really read this book? Because this is the collection of like photography and stuff like that. This guy basically goes around New York and takes pictures of people, and then they like say things about their captions in the book. So it's pictures of everyday people in New York, and there's little blurbs. You know, I'm saying that it counts as reading because there are definitely words on these pages. But the photography was beautiful. I gave it 5 stars because the photography was beautiful. It was really interesting to catch a glimpse into some people's everyday lives, and just to feel like you, I don't know, you can see 1,000 different faces in New York. And New York is like any other city. There's, you know, this whole just mass of people living these very different lives that cross each other on the street all the time, and you don't even know anything about it. It's definitely a visual kind of thing. I can't really explain it to you. You would just have to pick it up and really look at the photography for yourself. But he also has a second collection out called Humans of New York Stories, and I'm hoping to pick that one up soon as well. Then I picked up The Therapist in the Real World: What You Never Learn in Graduate School, but Really Need to Know by Jeffrey Kotler. And I picked this up again because I am a therapist. I am someone who practices. I did finish graduate school about a year ago, and so I saw this in the bookstore and thought, oh God, what didn't they tell me? What didn't I get in my, 6 figures plus amount of debt and 6 years of education? Let me just pick up another book because, yeah, they didn't really tell you everything. Not that I expected that they would. But so what I'm trying to say is that I don't know how interesting this book would be to someone who is not a practitioner, who is not a therapist. I don't know, maybe if you just like reading stuff about mental health, maybe you'd like to read this. But I picked it up because it was going to be useful and practical for my job, for my everyday life. But it's broken up into a couple sections. What the author thinks that you learn in graduate school, and then it gives you more about relationships. It tells you more about the difference between working in private practice, working in the public sector. It tells you about, business things that we don't really learn about as therapists, how to, establish and maintain relationships. It talks about boundaries and dual relationships, and it's really just, it's a nice refresher book, and it also gives you some insight into the business side of therapy and practice, which is something I definitely did not learn in my education. So overall, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was very approachable. I felt like it was written for someone like me who was young and recently out of school. It was written at a level that I could understand, which was something that I did appreciate, because sometimes these books can get kind of like a textbook, and they can be something that just goes right over your head. But I felt like the author was pretty cognizant about that whenever he was writing this book, so it was good to know. Next, I picked up Plagueland by Alex Scarrow. This is definitely your traditional dystopian, the world is ending, there was this viral disease outbreak, nobody knows what to do, and most of the population is dead. That's really what this book was about. I gave it 4 stars. I guess one thing I will say that I thought made it a little bit different than some of the other books is that you learn pretty early on that this virus that has killed everyone, it is extremely fast. You're dead within like an hour of touching it, and so you're thinking, well, if you're dead within an hour, then how does it travel? Well, it's also been partially like engineered by people, and so it's it functions kind of like a virus, kind of like a machine. So it actually moves and adapts, and it actually has like trajectory as to where it's trying to go and what it's trying to do. And it ends up being a much more complicated plot at the end than I thought it was going to be. There's a second book for this. I haven't picked it up, not because I don't want to read it, but because this is a redone design, and they haven't redone the design of the sequel yet. And to be completely honest, the cover art on the first go around for this duology looks really stupid. And so I just don't want to pick it up until they've redone the cover because I don't like the first one. But if you like, I feel like dystopian, if you like stuff about people dying and a little bit of sci-fi thrown in there, then you'll probably like this book. Next I picked up Survive the Night by Danielle Vega. I gave this book 3 stars. This is, I think, the only book that she's written that is not a part of the Merciless series, which I talked about. I read the Merciless 3 like a month or two, December. I read the Merciless 3 in December. So this is her only standalone. It is about these teenagers who go into like an underground rave thing, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the party one of their friends is dead and they don't know what happened to her, but she was very clearly murdered. And so then they're trying to get out from this party, which gets busted up by the cops, and then they're underground, right? And so, you know, the cops clear out and everybody's gone and they're just trying to leave and go back home, and all of the like sewer grate, the sewer hole things, you know, the things you have to like pop up to get up to the surface, they've all been sealed shut. And so basically they're trapped underground with this thing or person or entity, or they're not sure what, that very clearly killed one of their friends, and it starts to hunt them down and kill them as well. I felt like this book had a lot of potential. I felt like I was hoping there was going to be more from it that I did not get. At the end of the day, it was entertaining while I was reading it, but I didn't really feel like it brought anything original to this genre, to this storyline. So I just kind of gave it a 3. Like, I'm definitely not going to read it again, but it was at least bearable that I could get through it. So take that with a grain of salt. The next thing I read was At the Edge of the Universe by Sean David Hutchinson, and if you know anything about me, you know that Sean David Hutchinson is one of my favorite authors of all time, and I pretty much give everything that he writes 5 stars, and so it's no surprise that I gave this book 5 stars. I just feel like he has this really cool way of writing contemporary novels that also end up being a little bit like sci-fi, but also have really good messages behind them. So this book, as improbable as it may seem, is about these 2 boys who are boyfriends, Tommy and Ozzy, and one day Ozzy wakes up and Tommy is gone. He's vanished, completely disappeared, and nobody remembers that he ever existed except for Ozzy. And so he is trying to figure out what happened to his boyfriend, why he's gone, why can't anybody remember him, why can't he find any trace of him. And also, they've been best friends since they were young, and then they've been together since the 8th grade, like in a romantic relationship. And so now he's trying to figure out for the first time in his life, who is he without Tommy? Like, who is he as a person by himself in this universe where nobody else can remember that this guy even existed. Oh, and by the way, the universe is shrinking. Like, the universe is actually shrinking. Like, space is collapsing in on itself, and then all of a sudden, like, Australia doesn't exist, and then the other half of the world doesn't exist, and then only the United States exists, and then just Florida, and we're just perpetually shrinking until there's gonna be absolutely nothing. So we're, very close to the edge of the universe. Do you see what I did there? Do you see what I did there? Please don't make fun of me. I really like corny stuff like that. No, but seriously, this book has a really good point behind it, and it's just a little like wonky because he always adds like a sci-fi element behind it. And what I really appreciate about Sean David Hutchinson is that if you've read his other books that are published, like if you read them in order, the order in which they were published, you get a glimpse of the other characters, or like an interaction of other characters, or something about like the small towns in Florida. Like, they have very brief interactions that you're like, haha, I see what you did there. Like, he mentions like characters or scenery or something from We Are the Ants, which is another book that he wrote, and if you've read that, you would get it, and if you haven't read that, then like, it's not important, it's just something that like you can gloss right over. But I like that his books all have these little teeny tiny threads that like can pull upon each other, and I think it's just something that's like a nice little bonus if you're someone who's really committed to reading his books, because then you get like this little extra insider thing, I feel like. But I think that his books are always really emotional. I think they always have really good points behind them. I think that he doesn't just write like fluffy contemporary. A lot of his books are mental health related. A lot of his books have depression as an underlying theme. They talk about abuse. They talk about very serious relationship problems. And this book, I mean, it just delivered everything that I wanted it to. So I gave it 5 stars. Next book I read was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid, and holy shit. This book fucked me up, like, in a really good way. I still can't get over the ending of this book and the plot twist and what actually ended up happening, because it was just so well done. I was so surprised by everything that happened. Like, my heart was racing while I was reading this book, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I'm kind of sad that it was actually this short, because like I read the whole entire thing in one day. I couldn't put it down. It was great. This is like an adult mystery thriller book. Yay, I'm reading something that's not YA. Hooray. Yeah, this is an adult book, guys, and it's freaking amazing. I feel like I can't even really tell you anything about the book because honestly, it's best to just go into it blind. It's best to just go into it knowing absolutely nothing about it. And I think that way you'll end up being just as surprised as I was. But I feel like there was like one little blurb somewhere in this book. Or maybe I read it on Goodreads. This is like the very first paragraph in the book, and this is what drew me in, because this is also what happens to be on like the Goodreads blurb. I'm thinking of ending things. Once this thought arrives, it stays, it sticks, it lingers, it dominates. There's not much I can do about it. Trust me, it doesn't go away. It's there whether I like it or not. It's there when I eat, when I go to bed. It's there when I sleep. It's there when I wake up. It's always there, always. I haven't been thinking about it for long. The idea is new, but it feels old at the same time. When did it start? What if this thought wasn't conceived by me but planted in my mind, pre-developed? Is an unspoken idea unoriginal? Maybe I've actually known all along. Maybe this is how it was always going to end. Jake once said, sometimes the thought is closer to truth, to reality, than an action. You can say anything, you can do anything, but you can't fake a thought. You can't fake a thought, and this is what I'm thinking. It worries me, it really does. Maybe I should have known how this was going to end for us. Maybe the end was written right from the beginning. I'm thinking of ending things. If that doesn't reel you in, I don't really know what to say to you. This book was amazing. Please read it. If you have read it, please tell me what you thought, because I thought it was amazing. The very last book that I read for the month was Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I had previously read Sharp Objects by her. I gave this book 3 stars. I gave Sharp Objects 5 stars. I don't know, I feel like with these two meaning Dark Places and Sharp Objects, everybody tends to really like one and kind of just think that the other one's okay. So for me, I really love Sharp Objects, and I thought that this one was just kind of okay. I mean, it was enjoyable to read, but it just, for me, didn't pack the same punch as Sharp Objects did. This book is about Libby, who is sort of this like washed out adult. Her family was supposedly all killed in this satanic sacrifice when she was just a very young child, and her brother was convicted as the one who did it. She testified as a very young child that she saw her brother doing it. Her brother's now in jail. She doesn't really have it together, and as an adult she's running out of money because she's lived on like donations and proceedings from these things. She's on her 30s. She's never really had any direction in life. And then she's approached by this like fan type group who likes to solve like old mysteries and things, and so they believe that her brother is innocent, and they want to try to prove that that's not actually what happened that day, and they offer her money in exchange for like her time and help with the interviews and stuff, and so she decides to agree to that, and you basically end up finding out what really happened to this family many years ago. What I will say that I like about Gillian Flynn is that oftentimes her main character is very unlikable. Libby is not a likable person. She is rough around the edges, she's rude, she's not nice, she's in it for herself, she does not have a lot of redeeming qualities. She's kind of like scammy, and she doesn't really have any like tangible good long-term relationships. She's just rough around the edges. And I think that that fits in really well for the way in which Gillian Flynn writes novels. It's the same thing if you're talking about Camille from Sharp Objects. She's just not a super likable character. And so it's not that I have a problem with, because that's one of the things that I really like about her book. I just think that like I'm just not super into the like cult thing or the ritualistic sacrifice of a family thing. Like, I know for some people they find that really fascinating, and for me I just like, it's fine, but I don't think that it's necessarily anything to like write home about. Oh, the other thing that you'll want to know too is that this book does flip between present day Libby and past day her mom and past day her brother, so you get some of their firsthand like writings and accounts of what happened like the day that the whole entire family was murdered, and you sort of get to piece that together as you're going through the book. So just because I didn't like it though doesn't mean that I think that there's anything wrong with how it's written, and you might very well like it yourself. So those are all of the books that I read in February. If you are still here, I appreciate you listening to my ramblings. Please let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about below. And as a little bonus for sticking around, here's the puppy. He's been in the background the whole entire time, and he is very excited to see you. Goodbye.